Human evolution took millions of years, yet some adults still fight ceiling fans with their faces and lose. Today, we are exposing 50 of the most breathtakingly stupid decisions ever made by actual humans. No brilliant plans, no success stories, just pure, unadulterated brain rot that will make you feel like an absolute genius by comparison. Let's witness the chaos. 1. Getting highlights at the salon takes forever, but one restless client decided she knew better than her trained cosmetologist. Bored out of her mind, this absolute visionary dug into her purse and slapped on a metal shower cap she brought from home, figuring it would bake her hair faster. Well, she wasn't completely wrong about the baking part. The metal instantly reacted with the heavy bleaching chemicals, turning her head into a literal microwave. Instead of walking out looking like a Hollywood star, she gave herself severe third-degree scalp burns and melted massive chunks of her hair straight off. Because why wait an extra 30 minutes when you can just accidentally incinerate your own head? 2. Male bravado is a truly fascinating medical condition, especially when it involves fighting household appliances. We have all stared at a ceiling fan and wondered what would happen if we touched it, but one guy actually decided to test the theory with his face. Eager to prove to his buddies that standard spinning blades were completely harmless, he casually shoved his skull straight up into the roaring metal hurricane. Shockingly, physics remained undefeated. He woke up with a massive concussion and a fresh zipper of stitches across his forehead, finally admitting that a rapidly rotating blunt object will, in fact, absolutely rock your world. 3. Thanksgiving is that magical time of year when families gather around the table and someone inevitably tries to burn the neighborhood down. One ambitious home chef thought she would elevate the holiday by deep-frying her turkey. The only tiny hiccup? The bird was completely, undeniably frozen solid like a bowling ball. The absolute second that giant block of poultry ice hit the vat of boiling oil, the water instantly flashed into steam. This naturally created a catastrophic grease geyser that turned her wooden back porch into a raging inferno. Nothing says happy holidays quite like eating cold sandwiches while watching the fire department hose down your patio furniture. 4. What happens when an American tourist discovers traditional Japanese cuisine for the very first time? A culinary disaster of epic proportions. Sitting at a high-end sushi bar, this woman spotted a beautiful little bowl of bright green paste. Naturally, she assumed it was a complimentary serving of exotic Asian guacamole. Without a single second of hesitation, she scooped up a massive spoonful and swallowed it whole. That vibrant green mound was, of course, pure concentrated wasabi. Witnesses claimed her immediate physical reaction resembled a military jet engine test mixed with a demonic possession. She spent the next 20 minutes weeping tears of pure fire, completely redefining the concept of clearing out your sinuses. 5. Corporate email chains are already a form of psychological torture, but one guy managed to turn a simple mistake into digital Armageddon. After accidentally getting copied on a massive company-wide memo with 40,000 other employees, he totally panicked. Instead of just quietly deleting it, he smashed the dreaded reply all button and politely demanded to be removed. This single fatal click triggered a catastrophic avalanche. Thousands of confused co-workers and furious managers also hit reply all to yell at him, generating a tsunami of useless garbage that completely crashed the corporate servers for an entire Tuesday. He didn't just get off the mailing list, he essentially nuked the company's entire communication grid. 6. Disney movies have completely ruined our basic survival instincts. While driving through a gorgeous national park, a guy spotted a massive grizzly bear chilling by the tree line. Instead of locking his doors and keeping his foot hovering over the gas pedal, he saw a prime photo opportunity. He rolled his window completely down and started making little clicking noises, talking to a 1,000-pound apex predator like it was a stray golden retriever. The bear, deeply unamused by the baby talk, casually wandered over and ripped his heavy car door completely off its metal hinges. Miraculously, the guy survived, but explaining that auto insurance claim must have been an absolute comedy show. 7. Suburban landscaping is rarely an extreme sport, unless you are an impatient homeowner with zero grasp of chemistry. Sick of staring at an ugly, rotting tree stump in his front yard, A man decided the most logical removal method was to pack the entire thing with liquid gasoline and casually toss a match. The resulting massive explosion definitely took care of the stump, but it also violently blew out absolutely every single window in his own house. To make matters even worse, a flaming chunk of wood was launched directly through his neighbor's roof like a medieval catapult strike. Next time, maybe just rent a chainsaw like a normal person. 8. There is a special brand of arrogance reserved strictly for people in expensive clothes. A corporate executive wearing a ridiculously pricey tailored suit spotted a cardboard wet paint sign resting on a beautiful park bench. Completely convinced this was either a bizarre lie or some childish prank designed to mildly inconvenience him, he smugly brushed the sign aside and sat down to take a phone call. As it turns out, city workers do not place those warnings around just for their own personal entertainment. The bench claimed total victory that afternoon, leaving him with bright green horizontal stripes permanently stamped across his incredibly expensive Italian trousers. 9. Everyone has secretly imagined jumping a massive gap in traffic like a Hollywood stunt driver, but a woman in Michigan actually tried to make it a reality. Apparently running late for something life-altering, she decided she simply did not have the patience to wait for a rising drawbridge. She slammed her foot on the gas pedal, violently smashed right through the flashing safety barricade, and attempted to launch her sedan over the open water. Physics aggressively denied her action movie fantasies. Her vehicle completely missed the other side, nosediving straight into the concrete embankment. Being 5 minutes late really does not seem so bad compared to totally destroying your front bumper. 10. Brand loyalty is generally fine unless you are betting your own skin on a deeply questionable piece of early 2000s technology. One highly enthusiastic tech nerd was so absolutely convinced that Microsoft was going to destroy the iPod that he got a massive permanent tattoo of the Zune logo directly across his shoulder blades. Unfortunately for his social life, the Zune almost immediately became one of the most spectacular, widely mocked tech flops in modern consumer history. Production was quietly shut down, leaving this poor man walking around the local public pool with a giant, permanent memorial to a completely useless music player that nobody even remembers how to turn on. 11. In the grand pantheon of terrible heists, one aspiring master thief truly takes the absolute cake. While attempting to discreetly crack a heavily fortified bank safe in the middle of the night, an American criminal fumbled his crowbar and accidentally triggered an advanced lockdown protocol. The massive steel vault door violently slammed shut, permanently sealing him inside. Trapped in total darkness with his oxygen supply rapidly running out, he realized he only had one incredibly humiliating option left. He had to pull out his personal cell phone, call the local police department on himself, and literally beg the dispatchers to send a rescue team just so they could immediately arrest him. 12. City planners are practically famous for making completely brain-dead decisions, but this one deserves a special architectural trophy for public cruelty. A local council approved spending taxpayer money to install beautiful, sleek, solid metal benches in a downtown plaza. The punchline? This plaza was located in Phoenix, Arizona. By the middle of July, those gorgeous metal slabs absorbed so much direct desert sunlight that they essentially functioned as flat-top griddles. They were literally capable of searing human flesh right through a pair of heavy denim jeans. The city successfully funded a public seating area that was completely lethal to touch for 6 straight months of the year. 13. Buying a luxury sports car can make you do crazy things, but it usually shouldn't completely erase your basic common sense. A man who had just proudly driven off the dealer lot in a wildly expensive brand new convertible was absolutely blinded by his own excitement. He wanted to keep his new baby spotless, so he happily pulled right into a high-pressure automatic car wash. He entirely forgot that his amazing new vehicle featured a soft, delicate fabric roof. The heavy-duty spinning brushes violently shredded the top to absolute ribbons within seconds, pumping hundreds of gallons of soapy industrial water directly into his pristine, custom leather interior. 14. Local winter weather. Broadcasts always feature reporters standing in front of terrible drivers, but the universe really delivered a masterpiece during one specific live segment. The camera perfectly captured a sedan sliding completely out of control on black ice, and violently slamming into a metal guardrail. The stunned driver miraculously emerged from the wrecked vehicle without a single scratch on his body. He confidently strolled over to the news crew to give a live interview about how incredibly lucky he was to survive, took exactly 2 steps, slipped on the exact same patch of ice, and horrifically snapped his leg on live television. You can survive a massive car crash, but gravity always collects its debts. 15. There is absolutely nothing more frustrating than locking your keys inside your own vehicle. But one guy managed to turn a minor annoyance into a masterpiece of stupidity. After calling a professional locksmith for emergency help, he got incredibly bored waiting and miraculously managed to pry his own car door open using a bent wire coat hanger. Feeling like an absolute mechanical genius, he proudly marched over to the locksmith's van to cancel the expensive service call. In his victorious excitement, he accidentally bumped the heavy lock on the van door and shut it, perfectly trapping the still-running engine and the locksmith's only set of keys safely inside the truck. 16. Social media has convinced millions of people that dangerous apex predators just want to be background extras in their viral dance videos. Seeking the ultimate aesthetic post, a woman hopped over a heavy security barrier at a major zoo and started aggressively shaking her hips directly in front of the jaguar enclosure. The massive jungle cat was clearly not a fan of her terrible choreography, rapidly reaching through the thick chain-link fence and viciously mauling her arm. The absolute best part of this ridiculous circus is that after she recovered in the hospital, she actually issued a formal public apology, not to the traumatized children watching, but directly to the jaguar. 17. Counterfeiters usually try to fly under the radar with fake $20 bills, but one guy decided to go insanely, hilariously big. He walked right into a major electronics retailer, grabbed over $300 worth of gear, and casually handed the cashier a crisp, completely fake $1 million bill. If the ridiculous denomination wasn't bad enough, this specific masterpiece of forged currency prominently featured the grinning face of former President George W. Bush. The deeply unamused cashier simply stared at the totally absurd piece of paper, slowly looked the guy in the eye, and immediately called store security to haul away the least subtle criminal in American history. 18. If you are planning a daring midnight heist, it might be wise to skip the customer service questionnaire beforehand. 2 aspiring criminal masterminds in Connecticut were gearing up to rob a local retail shop, but they didn't want to waste their gas money if the register was empty. Their brilliant solution? They literally called the store from their personal cell phone and politely asked the cashier exactly how much cash was currently sitting in the drawer. The deeply confused employee immediately hung up and dialed 911. By the time our brilliant entrepreneurs finally pulled into the parking lot with their ski masks on, a heavily armed welcoming committee of police cruisers was already waiting. 19. Finding a massive hairy spider in your laundry room is a universally terrifying experience, but your reaction should generally stop somewhere short of domestic terrorism. A man in Seattle decided the only logical way to eliminate a single 8-legged intruder was to construct a makeshift military flamethrower out of a cheap gas station lighter and a highly pressurized can of spray paint. He completely missed the spider, but he did manage to instantly ignite his drywall. The raging inferno rapidly spread, forcing the evacuation of his entire apartment building and causing over $60,000 in catastrophic property damage. And yes, the spider almost certainly survived. 20. Testing out your new tactical gear sounds like a fun weekend activity, right up until you involve live ammunition and your immediate family members. A guy bought a brand new heavy-duty hunting jacket and somehow convinced himself that the thick canvas material was completely bulletproof. Instead of wrapping it around a tree stump like a normal human, he strapped it on and explicitly ordered his wife to shoot him directly in the chest with a .22 caliber rifle. Unsurprisingly, standard fabric does not magically stop high-velocity lead. After he was hastily stitched up at the local emergency room, the police promptly arrested both of them for unimaginable levels of domestic stupidity. 21. Buying incredibly dangerous gadgets online is an American pastime, but testing them out requires at least a shred of spatial awareness. A man proudly unboxed a highly illegal military-grade green laser pointer and immediately stepped onto his apartment balcony to see how far the beam would go. He aimed it straight up into the pitch-black night sky, perfectly tracking a tiny, blinking light miles above the city. That little floating dot turned out to be a heavily armed police helicopter on active night patrol. The incredibly angry pilots simply tracked the glowing green line directly back to his living room window, landed nearby, and immediately arrested him for assaulting an aircraft. 22. Stealing fuel is already a pretty pathetic crime, but karma has a truly magnificent way of punishing lazy criminals in the dark. Hoping to score a free tank of gas, a guy snuck up to a massive recreational vehicle parked in a deserted lot, shoved his rubber siphoning tube into the side port, and took a massive, deep breath to get the liquid flowing. He immediately got a violently foul mouthful of absolute pure terror, quickly realizing he had completely bypassed the gas tank and shoved his hose directly into the raw sewage holding tank instead. He spent the rest of his night violently throwing up in an alleyway, proving that crime tastes awful. 23. Creating your own backyard oasis sounds amazing, but combining massive amounts of tap water with raw electricity is usually heavily frowned upon by modern science. Desperate for a relaxing soak, a guy dug a giant hole in his lawn, lined it with a cheap plastic tarp, and filled it with a garden hose. Realizing the water was freezing cold, he bypassed every known law of safety by grabbing a live, high-voltage electrical wire from his garage and just casually tossing it straight into the puddle. The spectacular explosion and massive power surge instantly blew out the transformers for his entire residential block, leaving his furious neighbors sitting in total darkness. 24. Ohio residents are entirely built different, especially when dealing with basic household emergencies. During a massive neighborhood power outage, a guy blindly rummaged through his messy basement and found what he firmly believed was a really thick, antique wax candle. He struck a match and lit the heavy fuse, expecting a soft, romantic glow to fill the room. Instead, he was violently thrown against the wall, temporarily blinded, and completely deafened by a massive shockwave. It turns out his fancy candle was actually a highly unstable stick of industrial dynamite he had completely forgotten he owned. Amazingly, he survived the catastrophic indoor detonation with just a few minor cuts. 25. Sometimes being a massive cheapskate ends up costing you absolutely everything you own. A guy moving into his very first bachelor pad blatantly refused to spend $10 on a basic countertop toaster. Instead, he decided the absolute best way to make breakfast was to violently smash 2 slices of cheap white bread directly onto the glowing red heating coils of his electric stove. Within minutes, the dry bread instantly ignited into a raging fireball, filling his tiny apartment with thick, toxic black smoke and melting the expensive plastic dials right off the oven. He successfully saved $10, only to cause several $1,000s in heavy fire damage before breakfast. 26. Shopping carts are carefully designed for holding boxes of cereal, not for executing high-speed stunt maneuvers on public asphalt. A highly confident guy decided to seriously impress his buddies by holding onto the back of a metal shopping cart while being rapidly pushed down the street by a moving sedan. He was having the absolute ride of his life until one tiny, invisible pebble locked up the front right wheel. He was instantly launched out of his makeshift chariot like a human cannonball, violently snapping both of his arms, crushing his collarbone, and cracking several ribs upon impact. The truly pathetic part is that the car just kept driving, completely unaware he was gone. 27. The desperate pursuit of internet clout has completely destroyed our collective grasp on basic household chemistry. A prominent social media creator ran out of her expensive holding spray and decided that Gorilla Glue, a heavy-duty industrial adhesive meant for binding solid wood and concrete, would work perfectly fine on her scalp. The tragic result was a permanent, rock-solid helmet of impenetrable hair that absolutely defied all human attempts to wash, cut, or dissolve it. It ultimately took a grueling, incredibly expensive 4-hour medical surgery to finally chisel her scalp free from a deeply confusing cosmetic decision that the entire internet is still laughing about today. 28. Nobody really cares about your baby's gender, but one dad in Arizona decided to make absolutely sure the entire state knew his wife was having a boy. He spent weeks building a massive, highly illegal explosive device designed to shoot a brilliant cloud of blue smoke across a beautiful dry grassy field. The contraption violently detonated, instantly igniting a catastrophic, fast-moving wildfire that burned through 47,000 acres of protected land. It cost the government over $8 million and required hundreds of firefighters to finally extinguish his highly toxic narcissistic stunt. But hey, at least the smoke looked decent on camera before the forest burned down. 29. People will literally do anything for a perfect summer glow, even if it means transforming themselves into a human deep fryer. A deeply misguided man firmly believed standard sunscreen was a total corporate scam. So he generously coated his entire body in thick, greasy vegetable cooking oil and laid down directly under a high-intensity, commercial-grade tanning lamp. He was so incredibly relaxed that he promptly fell completely asleep. Hours later, he woke up in screaming agony to the horrifying smell of his own skin literally sizzling like bacon in a pan. He essentially cooked his outer epidermis, earning himself a massive trip to the burn ward for culinary-grade thermal injuries. 30. Petty revenge is a beautiful art form, but you really have to double-check your math before you execute the master plan. Absolutely furious over receiving a standard city parking ticket, a man marched down to the local courthouse with the brilliant intention of paying his entire $80 fine using completely unrolled filthy copper pennies. He dramatically hauled the incredibly heavy bags inside and triumphantly dumped thousands of dirty coins all over the terrified clerk's desk. The pure arrogance faded immediately when the automatic counting machine revealed he was exactly 27 cents short. The city gleefully refused to clear his massive ticket until he drove all the way home to find another quarter. 31. The outdoor apparel industry makes billions off people who completely refuse to understand basic human anatomy. A guy dropped nearly $100 on a pair of cutting-edge, heavily marketed waterproof socks, truly believing he had just discovered the ultimate hiking cheat code. He immediately marched straight into a rushing, muddy creek, expecting his feet to remain miraculously dry like a biblical miracle. He somehow entirely forgot that while the expensive synthetic fabric might block moisture from the sides, water perfectly obeys gravity and will simply pour directly down into the massive, gaping hole at the top where your actual human leg goes in. Enjoy the incredibly expensive, soggy swamp boots. 32. Giving an unpaid college kid full access to vital corporate infrastructure is basically just begging for a bankruptcy hearing. A stressed IT manager casually asked his brand-new intern to run a simple, one-line diagnostic code on an isolated test database. Sweating profusely and failing to check his active monitors, the kid blindly pasted the brutal command directly into the company's main production server and confidently hit enter. In about 3 seconds flat, he permanently wiped the entire corporate infrastructure, vaporizing absolutely every single piece of paying client data. It's incredibly safe to assume his afternoon exit interview involved a lot of screaming and packing his desk into a cardboard box. 33. Sometimes the human desire to be entirely unique violently collides with the terrifying reality of medical science. A woman desperately wanted the actual whites of her living eyeballs to be dyed a vibrant, glowing purple, so she found an unlicensed tattoo artist willing to stab tiny needles directly into her cornea. Predictably, injecting raw, unregulated cosmetic ink straight into a highly sensitive human organ went catastrophically wrong. The brutal procedure left her legally blind, suffering from chronic agonizing headaches, and literally crying thick drops of purple sludge for months. It is the absolute perfect example of finding a horrific, permanent solution to a completely imaginary problem. 34. Getting your sedan permanently stuck in a massive winter snowbank is deeply embarrassing, but drinking through the anxiety is a terrible coping mechanism. A heavily intoxicated guy in Finland called a professional tow truck for a late-night rescue, but decided to quickly kill the wait time by slamming several more heavy drinks in the driver's seat. By the time the massive flashing rig finally arrived, our hero was entirely removed from reality. When the highly confused driver asked for his standard service fee, the wildly drunk man seriously attempted to pay him by proudly handing over a massive, half-eaten block of cheese and a totally confused live hamster. 35. The absolute beauty of the American legal system is that you can literally try to sue absolutely anyone for anything. A highly stressed state senator in Nebraska actually took the time to draft and officially file a massive, deeply serious civil lawsuit directly against God himself. His official court documents aggressively accuse the Almighty Creator of intentionally causing widespread catastrophic death, terrible destruction, and deeply terrorizing millions of innocent voters. The presiding judge quickly threw the entire ridiculous case directly into the trash, strictly noting that since God does not have a permanently listed residential mailing address, it was legally impossible to serve him with the binding court subpoena. 36. Extreme athletic arrogance is a deeply dangerous game, especially when high-definition cameras are rolling. A highly trained marathon runner had absolutely crushed the grueling course and was literally steps away from breaking the finish line tape. Knowing he was miles ahead of his closest competition, he completely stopped running, turned around, and began loudly cheering and waving to the screaming crowd to soak in his massive victory. He was so incredibly busy flexing for the media that he entirely failed to notice the guy in second place absolutely sprinting past his shoulder at the literal last possible second. He instantly went from a local hero to a permanent, deeply humiliating internet meme. 37. The modern obsession with oversharing on social media is basically a golden ticket for professional identity thieves. An incredibly proud woman passed her driving exam and immediately snapped a high-resolution photo of her shiny new license to post on her public profile for all her lovely followers. She was so incredibly excited that she completely forgot to blur out her full legal name, exact date of birth, home address, and personal signature. A highly observant digital scammer grabbed the pristine image and successfully used her exact details to rapidly open 7 different maxed-out credit cards, entirely nuking her perfect financial credit score before dinner was even ready. 38. Yellowstone National Park is absolutely packed with breathtaking natural wonders and tourists desperately trying to get themselves boiled alive. Angry that a massive, ancient thermal geyser was not rapidly shooting boiling water high enough to impress his pathetic social media followers, a guy decided to physically cross the safety barricades. He proudly walked right up to the superheated, highly unstable volcanic vent and literally decided to urinate directly into the rocky opening to provoke a reaction. The angry Earth immediately rewarded his terrible attitude by violently blasting a pressurized geyser of highly acidic, terrifyingly boiling bacteria water straight into his totally unprotected face. Nature always wins these fights. 39. An incredibly frugal driver absolutely refused to pay a standard $3 highway toll. His absolute genius plan was to aggressively tailgate a massive 18-wheeler to sneak through the electronic gate completely undetected. He got so painfully close to the massive steel bumper that when the truck suddenly slammed on its heavy air brakes, his tiny sports car slid entirely underneath the massive trailer. He miraculously survived the crush, but ultimately had to pay a massive $5,000 emergency towing fee and a reckless driving ticket just to avoid paying 3 tiny crumpled dollar bills. 40. Some tourists entirely forget that the animal kingdom doesn't magically adhere to the strict rules of human sporting events. An incredibly arrogant American guy visiting an Australian wildlife reserve somehow convinced himself it would be absolutely hilarious to initiate a formal fistfight with a 6-foot-tall, wildly muscular adult kangaroo. He violently put up his bare knuckles, bobbed his head, and aggressively shadowboxed his way toward the massive marsupial. The totally unbothered animal simply leaned back on its incredibly thick tail and viciously kicked him dead in the chest with both feet, violently launching the idiot backward into the dirt like a deeply pathetic ragdoll. Welcome to the Outback, buddy. 41. Walking around a clearly marked construction site takes about 5 extra seconds, but some massive egos simply cannot handle the tragic inconvenience. A guy confidently marching down a busy downtown sidewalk spotted a completely massive, freshly poured rectangle of incredibly wet, gray cement completely blocking his path. Instead of stepping into the grass like a fully functional adult, he firmly believed he could just rapidly sprint across the liquid surface without breaking the tension. He confidently took exactly 3 massive strides before violently plunging straight down into the heavy sludge, permanently cementing himself up to both of his knees, until an incredibly annoyed crew had to literally dig him out with metal shovels. 42. Intrusive thoughts are incredibly difficult to fight, especially when you are trapped in a flying metal tube at 30,000 feet. A highly bored passenger, sitting on a commercial flight, stared heavily at the bright yellow emergency life vest tucked securely under his seat. Overcome by absolute pure curiosity, he ripped open the plastic packaging, slipped it over his neck, and violently yanked the bright red inflation cord while still tightly buckled into his tiny economy chair. The massive, highly pressurized balloon instantly pinned him completely against his tray table, rendering him totally immobile and permanently stuck in the narrow aisle. The highly exhausted flight attendants were positively furious. 43. Confidence in a job interview is genuinely fantastic, but complete sociopathic audacity is usually heavily frowned upon by human resources. During a wildly promising, incredibly intense final round interview for a major corporate position, a candidate's personal cell phone began loudly ringing. Instead of aggressively silencing it, he calmly answered the call, and directly in front of the highly stunned hiring manager, loudly and proudly accepted a completely different job offer from a major rival firm. He confidently hung up his device, smoothly folded his hands, and casually asked where they had left off. You will absolutely be completely shocked to learn that he definitely did not get the job. 44. Product demonstrations are supposed to generate massive sales, not horrific traumatic brain injuries in front of a live audience. A highly enthusiastic salesman was aggressively pitching a revolutionary, supposedly completely shock-proof motorcycle helmet to a massive crowd of skeptical bikers. To entirely prove its absolute incredible durability, he strapped the heavy plastic dome tightly onto his own head and ordered his massive buddy to literally smash him right in the skull with a heavy metal snow shovel. The incredible high-tech helmet absorbed the massive blow perfectly. His completely unsupported human neck, however, absolutely did not, and he instantly collapsed face-first directly onto the concrete floor. 45. Home improvement is incredibly expensive, which is exactly why some men should never be allowed near a power drill. Wanting to impress his buddies for a massive Sunday football party, a guy confidently mounted a brand new 80-inch flat-screen television directly into his living room drywall without hitting a single wooden stud. Exactly 3 seconds after kickoff, the massive electronic monolith violently ripped a giant hole straight through the sheetrock, crashing down and absolutely obliterating the snack table. He saved $50 on professional installation, but completely destroyed a $2,000 screen and 70 buffalo wings. 46. Moving heavy furniture is a massive pain, but physics truly does not care about your tight budget constraints. A guy bought a heavy king-size mattress and decided he did not need to rent a delivery truck. Instead, he strapped it to the roof of his tiny sedan by literally just having his passenger hold onto the fabric through the open windows. Hitting 60 miles an hour on the highway, the heavy mattress instantly became a massive aerodynamic sail, violently ripping his buddy's arms backward and launching the entire expensive bed straight into oncoming traffic. 47. Home invasions are typically frantic, highly aggressive affairs, but one guy in sunny Florida decided to treat his major felony like a relaxing staycation. After aggressively shattering a heavy glass window to break into a quiet suburban home, this overly confident burglar completely bypassed the expensive televisions and shiny jewelry. Instead, he casually wandered directly into the kitchen, fired up the expensive oven, and calmly began cooking himself a massive frozen family-sized meat lasagna. Apparently, breaking and entering takes a massive toll on the body, because he promptly passed out hard on the expensive living room sofa, which is exactly where the terrified homeowners found him snoring the next morning. 48. Action movies make explosive bank robberies look incredibly sleek, but reality is usually a deeply messy, heavily disorganized disaster. An aspiring criminal mastermind in rural Texas truly believed he could easily blast open a heavy steel ATM machine by casually stuffing the tiny cash slot with highly illegal heavy-duty explosives. Unfortunately, he drastically overestimated the exact amount of heavy dynamite required to pop the heavy metal door. The massive, deeply catastrophic explosion completely vaporized the entire machine and instantly incinerated every single $20 bill tucked inside it. The deeply confused cops found him helplessly standing in the smoking crater, quietly surrounded by thousands of tiny, completely worthless confetti-sized money fragments. 49. Cryptid hunting is a magnificent way to waste your precious vacation days, especially if your heavy-duty tactical gear comes strictly from the grocery store deli. An incredibly confident American tourist visiting the gorgeous, deeply misty lakes of Scotland fully convinced himself that he was going to be the absolute first human to successfully capture the legendary Loch Ness Monster. He actually spent his entire expensive 2-week European holiday silently sitting freezing on the muddy bank, literally dangling a single, heavily processed cheap hot dog on a thin plastic fishing line. He genuinely expected an absolutely massive prehistoric beast to wildly breach the dark surface just to grab a soggy piece of American barbecue. 50. Baking is a deeply precise science, but cleaning up the kitchen definitely shouldn't involve heavy garage equipment. After accidentally dropping a massive 5-pound bag of ultra-fine powdered sugar all over his kitchen floor, a fiercely lazy husband grabbed his heavy-duty industrial shop vacuum instead of a simple broom. He completely failed to realize that highly concentrated airborne sugar dust is genuinely combustible. The tiny electrical spark from the massive vacuum motor instantly ignited the sweet cloud, creating a literal thermobaric explosion that violently blew his wooden kitchen cabinets entirely off their metal hinges. I want to know exactly which of these 50 idiots deserves a permanent ban from society. Name them in the comments and aggressively defend your choice. If you can honestly say you have never done anything even half this stupid, you are either lying or incredibly boring. Prove me wrong down below. Smack that like button and subscribe before you accidentally destroy your house.